welcome to The Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a topic that, well, it feels like it's absolutely everywhere these days.
Oh, hard to miss it.
Right. You see it constantly, on apps promising instant calm, woven into company wellness programs, popping up in schools and therapy sessions. It's the ultimate buzzword, mindfulness.
It really is.
And it gets praised as this, miracle cure for stress, for anxiety, for just the general overwhelm of modern life.
Yeah.
But with all this hype, what are we really talking about? What is mindfulness deep down? And, what's the story behind it suddenly becoming so huge here in the West?
It does seem like it exploded overnight, doesn't it? Even though the roots are ancient.
Exactly. So you, our listener, have brought us a really fascinating mix of materials on this. We're looking at a whole stack of articles, trying to pin down a definition, research studies, practical guides on how to actually do it, and even some critical takes, raising some important ethical questions.
It's a really comprehensive set, covers the whole landscape, really.
Right.
From the basics, the history, the practices, the science, the benefits, but also those tricky questions.
So our mission today is, well, it sounds simple, but it's probably not. We want to cut through the noise, go beyond the marketing buzz.
Get to the substance.
Precisely. We're going to dive deep into these sources, pull out the most important insights, the stuff you might not know, the key takeaways, and together help you get a really clear, nuanced picture of what mindfulness actually is, how the sources say it works, and why it might matter, or why you might want to look at certain applications a bit more critically.
Yeah, because the sources show it's definitely not just one simple thing. It ranges from these really tiny everyday habits you could start right now.
Like mindful eating or something.
Exactly, simple things like that, all the way to complex scientific findings and these quite profound philosophical questions about its role in society. So yeah, lots to unpack.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The core concept. We hear mindfulness constantly, but what's the sort of foundational definition that most of these sources seem to agree on? What's the main idea we need to grasp first?
Well, one definition really stands out in the sources, and it's kind of the bedrock for a lot of the secular understanding. It defines mindfulness specifically as the awareness that emerges through paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally.
Okay, awareness that emerges through paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Let's break that down. Each part seems pretty crucial.
It really is. Each word adds a specific layer. So awareness, that's the starting point.
It's noticing things.
Pretty much. Just being aware of what's happening, both around you, externally and internally, your thoughts, your feelings, sensations in your body. But crucially, it's not just passive drifting.
Right, because it says on purpose.
Exactly. It's intentional. You're actively choosing to direct your attention somewhere specific. You're not just letting your mind wander wherever it wants. You're consciously engaging with your experience.
And in the present moment, it's another big one people associate with mindfulness. Focusing on the now.
Yes, and it's a really important anchor. It means bringing your focus to what is happening right now, in this very instant. Not getting lost in the past, replaying things, regrets, nostalgia, or jumping ahead to the future, worrying, planning, anticipating. It's about being here.
Okay, awareness, on purpose, present moment, and then the last bit, non-judgmentally. This feels like the really challenging part, maybe the most radical part for a lot of us. What does that actually mean in practice?
You're right. The sources consistently flag this as absolutely central. This non-judgmental quality is key for developing this attitude of openness, acceptance, and even curiosity towards whatever comes up in the present moment.
So not immediately slapping a label on things like good, bad, I like this, I hate this.
Exactly that. It's about noticing experiences, thoughts, feelings, sensations, even external events without that automatic layer of judgment or evaluation. You're observing them without immediately reacting or trying to push them away or cling to them.
And letting them be.
Letting them be and observing them with a kind of open curiosity. And this practice, this non-judgmental observation, leads to a really profound idea the sources talk about. The difference between having thoughts and being your thoughts.
Ah, okay. Tell me more about that.
Well, mindfulness helps you see that you are not your thoughts or your feelings or your sensations. You have them. They're like transient events passing through your awareness.
That's a huge shift. Because often it feels like my worries are me, or my anger is me.
It's a totally common feeling. Our minds generate this constant stream, and it's so easy to get swept up and identify with it, to believe these thoughts define us or are absolute truths. But mindfulness creates a little bit of space, like a buffer, between the observer you and the observed the thoughts and feelings.
So you can watch them without getting totally caught up.
Precisely. Like watching clouds drift by or cars drive past. They're happening, but they don't have to define your entire landscape or dictate your actions. And thoughts and feelings will keep coming. The goal isn't some impossible blank mind.
Right, that's a common myth, isn't it? That you're supposed to stop thinking.
It is. The practice is more about noticing when you've been carried away by thought and gently, kindly, bringing your attention back to your chosen anchor. Maybe your breath, maybe sounds, maybe the feeling of your feet on the floor.
So it sounds like the complete opposite of being on automatic pilot, which is how many of us feel we live our lives.
That's a great way to put it, and the sources use that exact language. Mindfulness is described as the antidote to that automatic pilot mode, where, so much of what we do, how we react, the decisions we make are driven by these unconscious habits and impulses.
The faster brain kicking in before the slower thinking brain catches up.
Kind of, yeah. When we snap at someone or mindlessly scroll or eat without tasting, it's often that automatic pilot taking over, disconnected from our deeper intentions or values.
And mindfulness helps bridge that gap somehow between the automatic impulse and the conscious choice.
Yes, by bringing awareness to the present moment, it helps you notice those automatic reactions starting to happen. It brings the slower, more conscious parts of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex, more online, so to speak. It helps align your actions with what your deeper brain centers actually care about, things beyond just immediate safety, like feeling connected, having a sense of purpose, reward, maintaining your identity, living by your values.
So you can choose a response that's more you, instead of just reacting.
Exactly. You get that crucial pause, that moment of awareness to choose how you want to respond based on your conscious values, rather than just letting the old habit run the show.
This connects directly to mind wandering, which the sources mention quite a bit. That state where your body's here, but your mind is totally somewhere else.
Yeah, mind wandering is described as almost the default setting for the human brain. Your body's doing one thing, walking down the street, maybe washing dishes, sitting in a meeting, but your mind is off planning the weekend, rehashing a conversation, worrying about finances, caught up in FOMO, just anywhere but here.
Mentally checked out.
Completely. And there's that really interesting study the sources mentioned from Harvard that used an iPhone app to track this in real time.
Oh yeah, tell us about that one.
So these researchers, Killingsworth and Gilbert, pinged thousands of people randomly throughout their day via an app. They asked simple questions. How happy are you right now? What are you doing? And crucially, is your mind focused on what you're doing, or is it wandering somewhere else?
And what did they find? How often are our minds wandering?
The results were pretty staggering. People's minds were wandering about 50% of the time. Half of their waking lives, their minds weren't focused on their present activity.
Wow, half the time.
Yeah, but here's the kicker, the really important part for understanding why present moment focus matters. They found that when people's minds were wandering, they consistently reported being less happy.
Less happy even than when they were doing something unpleasant but focused on it.
Exactly. Even during activities people didn't particularly enjoy, like commuting, they were happier if their minds were focused on the commute than if their minds were wandering off somewhere else. It provided strong evidence that, generally speaking, a wandering mind tends to be an unhappy mind.
That really drives home the value of just being present. Makes perfect sense when you think about getting lost in worries or regrets.
It does, and it gives a clear, data-backed reason for why practices like mindfulness, which train present moment focus, might actually increase well-being.
The sources also bring up this term selfing. What's that about?
Selfing is another concept linked to suffering. It refers to that endless internal chatter about ourselves, thinking about who we are, how we're doing, our past mistakes, our future worries, our flaws, our achievements. It's this constant self-preoccupation.
Often fueled by comparing ourselves to others.
Very often, yes. That internal scoreboard. Am I smart enough? Successful enough? Popular enough? And this gets amplified, of course, by things like social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, where we're constantly seeing these curated highlight reels of other people's lives, making comparisons almost unavoidable.
So this constant focus on me, and how I measure up that selfing, and the sources argue it makes us miserable.
That's the argument. And mindfulness offers a way out, or at least a way to get some perspective.
Yeah.
By shifting attention away from that internal narrative and towards the present moment, the breath, the sounds around you, the physical sensations of walking, it helps you see those self-referential thoughts as just thoughts, not necessarily reality, not something to get completely lost in.
It sounds like it also ties into that old philosophical idea, the only constant in life is change. Heraclitus.
Absolutely. The sources connect mindfulness directly to this fundamental truth. Because everything changes, nothing is permanent. Pleasant feelings fade, difficult situations pass, we age, relationships evolve. But our tendency is to fight this.
We try to cling to the good stuff and push away the bad stuff.
Exactly. We grasp at pleasant experiences, trying desperately to make them last forever, and we resist or avoid unpleasant ones, wishing they'd just go away. And the sources argue that this very clinging and resisting, this fight against the natural flow of change, is a primary source of our suffering.
Because we're fighting an unwinnable battle against reality.
Pretty much. Mindfulness, by cultivating presence and that non-judgmental acceptance, helps us learn to be with the changes moment by moment, to experience the pleasant without desperately clinging, and to navigate the unpleasant with less resistance, less pushing away. You learn to surf the waves of change rather than trying to stop the ocean.
Okay, so wrapping up this first section on definition. Mindfulness, based on these sources, is really about intentionally paying attention to the present moment without judging what you find there. It's learning to observe your thoughts and feelings without getting hijacked by them, kind of waking up from automatic pilot. It's a tool to counter that constant mind wandering, step back from the suffering caused by selfing or comparing, and learn to flow with life's inevitable changes more gracefully.
Cool.
That gives us a really solid starting point.
I think that covers the core concepts well. It sets the stage for understanding where it came from and how it's practiced.
Right. So let's talk history. Because while mindfulness feels super modern with the apps, the corporate programs, the sources make it clear its roots go way, way back.
Oh, absolutely. Millennia back. What we generally call secular mindfulness today in the West. Its main practices and ideas come primarily from Buddhist meditation traditions.
But it's not only Buddhism, right? The sources mentioned other traditions too.
That's a really important clarification they make. Contemplative practices, ways to quiet the mind, focus attention, connect, inwardly exist in many, many different religious and spiritual traditions across the globe. The sources specifically mention Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam as having their own forms. But for various historical reasons, it was the Buddhist strand that really took root and gained momentum here in the West, leading to the mindfulness movement we see now.
And the sources talk about a sort of tipping point that really accelerated its spread here.
Yeah, one source uses that term, drawing on Malcolm Gladwell's idea. While different forms of meditation arrived in the West over many decades, the really widespread mainstream adoption is more recent. And several factors fed into this, including the rise of what sociologists called cultural creatives back in the late 1980s.
Cultural creatives, what kind of group was that?
It was a term coined by Paul Ray and Sherry Ruth Anderson to describe a pretty large chunk of the population who were, interested in spirituality, personal growth, social issues, ecology. But they were often looking for alternatives to traditional Western religion, medicine, and culture, especially when dealing with things like chronic stress or illness.
So they were open to new approaches, holistic ideas.
Exactly. They were seeking mind-body connections, holistic health, practices that aligned with their values. This created this really fertile ground, a receptive audience for something like mindfulness, especially when presented in a secular, accessible way to really take off.
And this is where Jon Kabat-Zinn enters the picture. His name comes up again and again in these sources as being absolutely central.
He's arguably the key figure in bringing mindfulness into the Western mainstream, particularly into medicine and psychology. He was a molecular biologist, actually, at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. But crucially, he also had a long-standing personal meditation practice, trained in both Zen and Theravada Buddhist traditions.
And he saw a way to apply this practice clinically.
That's the story. In the late 1970s, he was involved with a chronic pain clinic at UMass. And as the sources point out, back then, conventional medicine often had very little to offer people suffering from chronic pain that wasn't just medication with side effects. These patients were really struggling.
So he thought meditation might help them cope, even if it couldn't cure the pain itself.
Precisely. He wondered if these techniques, which he found personally beneficial, could help these patients manage their pain, reduce their suffering, improve their quality of life. So he started adapting these Buddhist meditation practices into a structured 8-week non-religious program for them. And apparently the results were pretty striking, both to him and the patients.
And this is where his scientific training kicked in, right?
Yeah.
He didn't just rely on anecdotes.
Exactly. Being a scientist, he knew the importance of evidence. So he started conducting rigorous studies, randomized controlled trials to measure the effects objectively. Through the 80s, he published research showing that this program led to statistically significant reductions in patients' reported pain, improvements in their ability to function, reductions in anxiety and depression, and generally increased well-being.
And the scientific validation seems to be the point where he deliberately started calling it mindfulness and created the MBSR program, mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Yes, the sources describe this as a very conscious, strategic move. He took the core principles and practices, especially from his Zen training, but stripped away the specific cultural and religious context. He framed it in secular language, combined it with scientific methodology for evaluation, and packaged it as MBSR. Mindfulness became the term for the core skill being cultivated.
So that distinction between mindfulness and meditation, is it primarily about whether it's presented in a secular scientific context versus a traditional religious one, even if the actual practice, like focusing on your breath, is the same?
That's the main distinction the sources draw. Mindfulness, especially in the context of MBSR and similar secular programs, generally refers to these practices taken out of their original religious framework, often studied scientifically for therapeutic benefits like stress reduction or pain management. Meditation might still carry the implication of being practiced within a specific Buddhist or other spiritual tradition, perhaps as part of a larger ethical or philosophical path. So yeah, the action of mindful breathing could be identical, but the label and the context signal different things about its origins, framing, and intended application.
It's really fascinating how that transition happened, taking ancient practices into modern science labs and clinics. Okay, so we have the definition, the history. Now let's get practical. How do you do it? The sources offer some really simple ways to practice that don't involve, hours on a cushion.
That's a really key message in the sources. Mindfulness isn't this huge, intimidating thing you have to dedicate your life to. It can be woven into your day in really small, manageable ways. And the emphasis is that these little moments of practice, done consistently, add up. They train your brain over time.
I like the sound of the mindful wake-up. Starting the day with intention seems like a good first step.
It's presented as a really simple habit, and it ties back to that automatic pilot idea. Neurologically, when we wake up and immediately grab our phone or feel stressed before our feet hit the floor, it's often those faster automatic impulses taking over before our conscious brain is fully engaged.
So the mindful wake-up helps connect those systems right away.
That's the idea. Just taking a few moments when you first wake up, maybe noticing your breath, feeling the warmth of the bed, setting a simple intention for the day like, I want to be patient or I want to focus. It helps align your conscious mind with those deeper drives the lower brain cares about. Things like connection, purpose, reward, identity, values. It sets a more intentional tone for the day rather than just reacting.
Mindful eating is another one that sounds simple but is probably revolutionary for most of us.
Oh, definitely. The sources point out how often we eat completely distracted, scrolling, working, watching TV. We just shovel it in, bite, chew, swallow, and barely notice the taste or texture. Sometimes you finish a meal and can hardly remember eating it.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah.
So what does mindful eating look like?
It's about bringing your full attention, all your senses, to the experience. Feeling the food's texture in your mouth, really tasting the flavor sweet, savory, bitter, noticing the aroma before you even take a bite, seeing the colors on the plate. The sources suggest this nourishes us on more levels than just physical nutrition. It taps into subtle senses, making eating richer, more pleasurable, more satisfying. And interestingly, focusing on just eating can make you more efficient overall because single tasking improves focus.
Okay, I need to try that. No more desk lunches while typing emails. There's also a really specific example for dealing with traffic jams, mindfulness behind the wheel.
Yes, a very relatable stressor. This practice offers a few quick steps. First, take a deliberate, deep breath. The sources explain why. It gets oxygen flowing, counteracts the stress response, but maybe more importantly, it creates a pause. A tiny space between the trigger, the guy cutting you off, the endless red lights, and your usual frustrated reaction.
That space gives you a chance to choose how to react.
Exactly. Instead of instantly tensing up or getting angry, you have a moment. Step 2 is to quickly ask yourself, what do I need right now? Maybe it's safety, maybe just ease, maybe relief from the tension in your shoulders. Just identifying that need can bring a bit of balance and self-awareness.
And the source mentions taking another deep breath as step 5. Was there a gap in the source?
Yeah, that numbering is a bit odd in the source description. It seems like they highlighted the key actions, the initial breath, identifying the need, the final breath, rather than a strict 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The point is, these few steps can happen really fast, like in 15 seconds, and shift your whole state. And that final breath, the source suggests adding an intention, like offering yourself and others the condition you need. May I be safe breathing in, may you be safe breathing out, may we all be safe. It's a little seed of kindness in a frustrating moment.
That's a really practical, compassionate approach. Another practice described sounds quite lovely, the mindful tea party.
It does sound nice, doesn't it? And the sources stress it only takes about 10 minutes. It's framed as this intentional pause, a mini ritual to step out of the busyness. The founder of Samovar Tea Lounge is mentioned as describing this.
So what are the steps for this tea party?
First, get some good tea whole leaf, maybe unflavored, is often suggested for the full sensory experience. Then, when you boil the water, make that your focus. Just watch the water heating, listen to the sounds, notice your breath, appreciate the simple elements of water and heat.
Slowing down right from the start.
Exactly. Third, pour the water over the leaves. Use plenty of leaves. Steep briefly, maybe a minute. Notice the steam, the aroma, breathe easy. Fourth, remove the leaves and just sit with the cup for a couple of minutes as it cools slightly. Notice the color, the smell, feel the warmth in your hands. Maybe reflect on the journey those leaves took to get to you.
Has a sense of connection.
It does. And finally, drink it slowly. Pay attention to the temperature, the taste, earthy, grassy, floral, the feeling in your mouth, the body of the tea, creamy, thin. Notice it all. And the key point the source makes is that focusing fully on this simple act can actually enrich the rest of your day, not because the day changes, but because you've changed. You've practiced presence.
That's powerful. Transforming your experience, not the external world. Now, mindful listening is another key one.
Yes, and the sources frame it interestingly. To be a good listener to others, you first need to be able to listen to yourself. Self-awareness is the foundation.
How does that work? How do you practice mindful listening?
It starts with checking in internally before or as someone speaks. Ask yourself, how am I feeling? Is anything inside me, distraction, strong emotion, judgment, going to get in the way of truly hearing this person? Then decide if you need to address it or can gently set it aside. Second, bring your full intentional attention to the speaker with openness, curiosity, empathy.
So managing your own internal noise first.
Right. Third, as they speak, just silently notice your own reactions popping up, thoughts, judgments, feelings, memories. Observe them without interrupting or getting lost in them, then gently bring your focus back to the speaker. And finally, show you've heard them, maybe reflect back what they said, use their words, paraphrase, help them feel truly heard.
A vital skill. Okay, the sources also cover a mindful sleep grounding exercise, mentioning that mindfulness is part of newer insomnia treatments.
Yeah, a racing mind is a huge culprit in sleep problems. This exercise aims to calm the system. First step. Dim the lights about an hour before bed, signals your brain to wind down. Do quiet, relaxing things outside the bedroom during this time. Second, and this is crucial, no screens, phone, tablet, computer, TV. The blue light messes with melatonin production, keeping you awake.
Okay, dim lights, no screens, calm activity. Then the exercise itself.
About 10 minutes before bed, sit comfortably, maybe in that dimly lit room. Close your eyes and imagine the outline of your body. Slowly trace this outline in your mind for about 5 minutes. As you trace, notice the physical points of contact pressure against the chair, your feet on the floor. Where is it heavy? Where is it light? Go down one side, up the other.
And if your mind wanders off to tomorrow's worries?
Totally normal. Just notice it. Thinking about the meeting. Kindly, without judgment, gently guide your focus back to tracing your body or feeling the pressure. It's about the noticing and returning. After 5 minutes or so, get into bed and focus on your breath. Now, if you can't fall asleep after, say, 20 minutes, the advice is to get up, go back to the chair, repeat the exercise, and only return to bed when you feel sleepy again.
To break the association of bed with frustration.
Exactly. Retrain your brain that bed is for sleep. Just don't fall asleep in the chair.
Good point. Another simple one mentioned is mindful appreciation.
This is about intentionally noticing the good, especially when things feel tough. It's simple. By the end of the day, identify 5 things you appreciate and list them.
Do they need to be big things?
Not at all. Often it's more powerful to appreciate the small, everyday things we take for granted: clean water, a comfortable bed, the ability to walk, a kind word from someone. Focusing on these basic elements can really shift your perspective towards gratitude. The sources also highlight specific techniques often found in guided practices, like the stop command.
Stuppy. What's that?
It's a technique for interrupting negative thought spirals. When you notice you're caught in unproductive worry or rumination, you mentally or quietly aloud say stop. The idea is it acts like a pattern interrupt, creating a pause, making the thoughts momentarily disappear, giving you space to redirect your attention.
Like hitting a mental pause button.
Kind of. Another element is the conscious awareness count-up, slowly counting 1 to 10, with pauses, bringing awareness back, feeling refreshed. And across all these, there's a huge emphasis on consistency.
Doing it daily.
Yes, the sources stress daily practice, even if brief. They mention the idea of 21 consecutive days to form a habit, suggesting that's how real change happens.
They also touch on visualization, especially for things like healthy eating or self-love.
Right, visualizing yourself making healthy food choices, enjoying nutritious meals, feeling good about it, also visualizing confidently saying no to unhealthy options, feeling proud, and connecting that conscious nourishing of your body to self-love.
Which leads to self-love affirmations.
Exactly. Repeating positive phrases to yourself to counter negative self-talk. Things like, I am worthy of love. I accept myself unconditionally. It involves noticing that critical inner voice and actively challenging it with these kinder statements.
And lastly, that 5-4-3-2-1 exercise for grounding.
Yeah, the senses exercise. It's great for overwhelm or anxiety. You quickly bring yourself back to the present by noticing 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. It pulls you out of your head and straight into your immediate sensory reality. Really useful.
Wow, that's quite a toolkit. It really shows how mindfulness isn't just one thing, but a whole range of ways to bring awareness into different parts of your life.
Exactly. The variety shows its flexibility. Start small, be consistent. That's the recurring advice.
So with all this interest in these practices, what about the evidence? Do the sources show research backing up the benefits?
They do. They summarize a wide range of reported benefits: less stress, anxiety, depression, better focus, efficiency, relationships, more calm, life satisfaction, vitality, self-esteem, empathy. And they mention that early Kabat-Zinn work showing better pain management.
And this connects to trait mindfulness too, like how mindful a person generally is.
Yes, studies find correlations. People who score higher on trait mindfulness tend to also report higher life satisfaction, conscientiousness, optimism, autonomy, competence, things like that. And conversely, lower scores on trait mindfulness are linked with higher depression, neuroticism, rumination, social anxiety, and emotion regulation difficulties.
That early chronic pain research by Kabat-Zinn seems really foundational.
Absolutely pivotal. The sources mention that 1985 study specifically, 90 chronic pain patients went through the 10-week MBSR program. They found statistically significant drops in reported pain, less pain interfering with activity, better mood, less anxiety and depression, even reduced use of pain meds. It was really strong early evidence for clinical use.
Now, one area the sources really dig into is the comparison between mindfulness and relaxation. People often use those terms interchangeably, but the sources say there's a key difference.
This is a really important distinction they highlight, especially in therapeutic contexts. While both mindfulness and relaxation can be helpful for well-being and stress, they have different core aims and mechanisms, according to the research cited.
What's that core difference in the goal?
Relaxation techniques like progressive muscle relaxation or calming guided imagery usually aim to directly reduce or eliminate discomfort. You're trying to achieve a physiologically relaxed state, to feel better by changing the uncomfortable feeling. Mindfulness, especially in therapies like ACT, has a different emphasis. It's about developing an open, non-reactive relationship with all experiences, including the uncomfortable ones.
So not trying to get rid of the discomfort, but learning to be with it.
Exactly.
No.
Learning to tolerate it, allow it, observe it without needing it to change or go away. The theory is that struggling against unpleasant feelings, like anxiety or sadness, can actually make things worse, turning normal discomfort into a disorder. Mindfulness teaches that these internal states, while maybe unpleasant, are often harmless and don't need to be fought.
And how does mindfulness supposedly achieve this differently than relaxation, mechanism-wise?
The sources mention a few things. Mindfulness practices function like exposure, gently bringing you into contact with difficult sensations or emotions, building tolerance over time. They strengthen attention control, helping you disengage from unhelpful repetitive thinking, like worry or rumination. And they promote cognitive decentering, seeing thoughts as just mental events, not facts you have to obey or believe. These mechanisms focus on changing your relationship to the discomfort, not necessarily the discomfort itself.
Do the research comparing them actually find these differences?
Yes, the sources cite studies pointing in that direction. One systematic review found mindfulness generally had larger positive effects on things like well-being, anxiety, and stress compared to relaxation alone. Other studies suggested mindfulness specifically helps with emotional tolerance, decentering, and reducing rumination in ways relaxation might not. That chronic pain study, for instance, found the mindfulness group was better at managing distress during a stressful task compared to the relaxation group.
So mindfulness might offer something unique for problems involving avoiding feelings or getting stuck in thought loops. What does this mean for therapists using these?
It suggests clinicians might choose mindfulness specifically when experiential avoidance or rumination is a big issue, like in GAD, depression, maybe panic disorder, where people fear physical sensations. Relaxation might be easier for some people to grasp initially, but mindfulness directly targets that acceptance piece. Of course, the sources also say they can be combined, and the evidence is still evolving. Sometimes relaxation might indirectly help with tolerance too, but the direct teaching of acceptance seems to be a key differentiator for mindfulness.
It definitely sounds like scientists are paying more attention.
Oh, hugely. One source showed a graph journal articles mentioning mindfulness went from almost none in the early 80s to over 1,200 in 2019. Just an exponential explosion of research interest across many fields.
That's incredible growth.
Yeah.
Okay, so we see the potential benefits, the unique mechanisms. Where else is mindfulness being applied beyond therapy or personal practice? The sources talk about workplaces and schools.
Right. It's moving into organizational settings, often talked about as organizational mindfulness or collective mindfulness. This isn't just about individuals meditating, it's about mindful awareness becoming part of the organization's culture, how teams communicate, how leaders make decisions, how problems are handled. The aim is to make the whole organization more resilient and effective.
How does a company build that collective mindfulness?
The sources mention specific practices like paying close attention to subtle changes and potential failures, being really open to discussing problems instead of ignoring them, actively seeking out diverse perspectives and critical feedback at all levels, and resisting the urge to oversimplify complex situations. It's about fostering awareness and responsiveness system-wide.
And the benefits for the organization?
They flow from the individual benefits. Less stressed, more focused, more resilient employees contribute to a better functioning organization overall. Better communication, maybe better decision-making, more adaptability.
There was that case study about the veterinary group, CVS.
Yes, CVS Group in the UK. The sources highlighted the incredibly high stress and suicide rates in the veterinary profession. So CVS offered mindfulness training to their staff.
And did it help? What were the results?
They measured it. They found statistically significant drops in stress and big improvements in resilience after the training. There was also a powerful story from a practice manager who said it helped her lifelong depression more than medication or therapy had, boosting her confidence hugely. They even made a business case for it, projecting a potential 300% ROI based on reduced absence and better productivity.
Wow, that's compelling. And the law firm, Ashurst.
Ashurst used mindfulness too, but framed it as one tool in their broader well-being strategy, explicitly not a magic fix or silver bullet. They aim to help their lawyers with focus, engagement, and bringing their whole selves to work, tackling issues like lack of sleep and downtime common in that field.
How do companies usually deliver this training?
Different ways. Teacher-led groups have strong evidence plus group support. Virtual classes are scalable, maybe offer privacy, but can have tech issues or lower engagement. Then you have apps and digital programs, super scalable, self-paced, cost-effective, but often lack interaction and have high dropout rates. The best fit depends on the audience, tech access, budget, and goals.
And making it stick long-term. It can't just be a one-off training.
Right. The sources list strategies, measure outcomes to show value, build a community of internal advocates, create mindful physical spaces, like quiet zones, integrate it into health pathways, like occupational health, include it in return to work plans, build it into planning processes, like checking for biases, and embed it across the employee journey from hiring to exit. It needs to be systemic.
Makes sense. What about schools? Is mindfulness catching on there?
Yes, definitely. But with mixed results and some real challenges highlighted in the sources, there are some inspiring examples, though.
Like the one in Baltimore.
Yeah, that elementary school replaced detention with a mindful moments room where kids did liquid yoga. The reported result: 0 suspensions in the first 2 years.
0. That's amazing for an elementary school.
It's presented as a really powerful outcome. But then there's the contrasting story.
The one in Georgia.
Right. That school introduced mindfulness and de-stressing exercises, but faced backlash from some parents who felt practices like yoga, using Sanskrit terms, or even mandala coloring contradicted their Christian beliefs. The school had to adapt, removing elements perceived as religious.
That really highlights the need for sensitivity, doesn't it? Cultural and religious awareness.
Absolutely. It shows you have to be really clear about why you're introducing it, the secular reasons, understand the community's context, and be prepared to communicate and adapt carefully. And this leads directly into another really critical point the sources emphasize regarding ethics, especially when working with potentially vulnerable people: trauma-informed mindfulness.
Trauma-informed. That sounds crucial. What does it mean here?
It means recognizing that trauma is widespread and can deeply affect how someone experiences their body, their sense of safety, and practices involving stillness or internal focus. Introducing mindfulness without awareness of this can actually be harmful, triggering, or re-traumatizing. So being trauma-informed isn't just good practice, it's an ethical necessity.
What are some specific things practitioners need to do?
The sources list several key things. Keep rooms well lit. Darkness can feel unsafe. Always offer choices. Let people sit instead of lie down if laying down feels vulnerable. Let them skip any pose or practice that feels wrong, offering simple alternatives. Be mindful of specific yoga poses like downward dog or forward fold that can be triggering for certain trauma survivors, especially sexual abuse survivors.
Choice and avoiding triggers seem paramount.
Definitely. Also, avoid physical adjustments unless explicitly requested and consented to. Warn people before using potentially startling sounds like bells. Start with very short periods of stillness or breath focus, as sustained internal focus can be overwhelming initially for trauma survivors. And always have grounding techniques ready, feeling feet on the floor, hands in the lap, getting water if someone becomes distressed or triggered. It's about creating genuine safety and empowering the individual.
That level of care feels essential, especially if you don't know people's histories.
It really foregrounds safety and do no harm.
And finally, the sources mentioned the military using mindfulness.
Yes, briefly noting the U.S. military's adoption of mindfulness, specifically mentioning its use for optimizing combat performance. And this specific application ties directly into some of the ethical critiques we're about to discuss.
Okay, so we've heard about the benefits, the applications, but the sources insist on a critical look too. What are the main ethical concerns or challenges they raise about this whole mindfulness phenomenon?
Right. Despite the popularity and benefits, the sources stress the need to step back and reflect critically on its origins, how it's being used, and what the broader implications might be. It's not all smooth sailing.
What are some of those major critiques?
A big one, coming especially from Buddhist psychotherapists mentioned in the sources, is the separation of mindfulness practice from the broader Buddhist ethical and philosophical framework it came from. The worry is that secular mindfulness often just takes the techniques to reduce stress or improve focus, without engaging with the deeper understanding of suffering or the ethical principles like compassion, non-harming, wisdom that traditionally guide the practice.
So the concern is it becomes just a technique for feeling better, without prompting deeper change, like a Band-Aid.
That's exactly the concern, that it might just lead to superficial calmness, helping people cope with stressful situations without questioning the situations themselves. One source uses the term opiate, suggesting it could numb people to societal problems or demanding work cultures instead of empowering them to seek change. It risks becoming just another self-improvement commodity you consume, rather than a path of genuine transformation rooted in values.
The sources also brought up some really troubling historical examples of misuse.
Yes, and this is used to illustrate the potential for distortion when techniques are divorced from ethics. The most stark example is from WWII Japan, where elements of Zen mindfulness training called combat zazen were reportedly used by the military. The aim wasn't peace, it was to enhance soldiers' focus and detachment so they could kill more effectively, unquestioningly and serenely, as one source puts it, a profound distortion.
That's chilling. And they connect this to modern concerns.
They draw parallels, suggesting caution. When we hear about mindfulness being used to optimize combat performance today, or potentially being used by corporations only to boost productivity without addressing underlying workplace issues, it echoes that risk. The concern is that these powerful techniques can be co-opted for narrow, potentially harmful ends if the ethical dimension is ignored.
And that Georgia school example with the parental complaints fits here too, under cultural sensitivity as an ethical issue.
Definitely. It highlights the ethical need for transparency about origins, clear communication about secular purpose, and genuine sensitivity to diverse beliefs when implementing these practices, especially in public institutions. Responsible implementation requires navigating these differences respectfully.
And the trauma-informed practices we discussed presented as ethical mandates too.
Absolutely. The sources frame trauma-informed care not just as best practice, but as a fundamental ethical responsibility. Failing to consider potential trauma triggers and provide a safe, choice-based environment risks causing harm, which violates basic ethical principles of care. Safety and agency must come first.
It's also clear mindfulness isn't being sold as a cure-all in these sources.
Right. They emphasize it might not be right for everyone, especially those with severe mental health conditions, or it might be one part of a larger treatment plan, but not a standalone solution. It's not a silver bullet. And ethically, support needs to be available if people struggle with the practice.
And busting those common myths seems like part of the ethical responsibility too, being honest about what it is and isn't.
Exactly. Managing expectations is key for responsible practice. So, reiterating. You don't stop thoughts, you observe them. It's not just sitting silently. You don't need hours. It doesn't have to be religious. And it won't lead to constant bliss. Life's ups and downs still happen. Mindfulness changes how you relate to them. Being clear on these points is ethically important.
Okay, that brings us towards the end of this deep dive. We've really covered a lot of ground from defining mindfulness as that intentional, present moment, non-judgmental awareness, to tracing its journey from ancient roots through Jon Kabat-Zinn's work into the mainstream.
We looked at so many practical ways to practice it in daily life: waking up, eating, driving, listening, even making tea or getting ready for sleep. We examined the evidence for its benefits, including how it seems to differ from relaxation by focusing on acceptance. And we saw its wide reach into workplaces and schools, with both successes and challenges.
And crucially, we didn't shy away from the ethical considerations, the critiques about separating it from its roots, the potential for distortion, the absolute need for cultural sensitivity and trauma-informed approaches.
Yeah, the sources really give us a rich, complex picture. At its heart, the secular mindfulness is about cultivating that ability to be present with kindness and openness. And the consistent message is that even small, regular efforts to do that can lead to pretty significant shifts over time in how you experience your life.
So as you, our listener, digest all this, maybe take a moment to reflect. Did any of those simple practices resonate? Did the mindfulness versus relaxation distinction click something into place for you? Maybe just try one small thing, mindful eating at your next meal, or that quick breathing exercise in traffic.
And think about those ethical questions too. How is mindfulness showing up around you? What are the intentions behind it? A truly mindful perspective, as these sources suggest, includes observing the mindfulness trend itself with curiosity and discernment.
And here's a final thought to leave you with, building on what we've uncovered. We saw that being more mindful generally is linked to good things like life satisfaction, but also, interestingly, it's correlated with less rumination and anxiety. If mindfulness helps us be more present with everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, what does that really say about well-being? Is the goal just to feel happy and calm all the time?
Or is it maybe something deeper? Is it about building the capacity to fully inhabit our entire human experience, the joy and the sorrow, the comfort and the discomfort, with more awareness and acceptance? What opens up when you can learn to simply be with whatever is arising without needing to immediately judge it or fix it or push it away?
Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.